Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Hunter, and this is Zach.
And this is our best guess. So the last couple episodes we did were, we're still just starting out, and I like them. I like what we talked about. I like how we talked about it. It's still a little bit clunky because we're still, like I said, we're starting out.
Yeah, we're brand new trying this out.
And I think a place we got lost is people don't really know the issues we're talking. We brought up sort of the conversation around an issue without talking about the issue first. So today we're kind of just going to be talking about issues that we have in general.
Yeah, I think another thing that we talked about was we were a little more formal in the last one, and it was, really stiff. And we're really not like that. We do bounce around subjects quite quickly, so
Right.
we're going to try and keep it straight, kind of.
Keep it straight. Just keep it flowing, because when we think about what we're gonna say too much, it gets a little bit boring and stiff.
Yeah, definitely. So you'd brought up mental health
Mm-hmm.
earlier. Would you like to tell people how you solved mental health? Because I have such an issue with it.
I I was a little bit hyperbolic, and that was we're just friends talking, but
just shooting the shit about mental health.
shooting the shit about mental health. But basically, something I'm trying to figure out is, does the responsibility lie on the individual or society to sort of fix mental health or health in general?
I don't know. See, okay, so my issues with mental health are, again, and we'll just reiterate this: the social programs that we have are ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
They clearly don't work. They either don't have anything mandatory about them. They're too expensive. They're hard to get into. They're ineffective at the end.
I didn't even know that there was social or public mental health services.
There are nonprofits. I'm not sure about public mental health services. I know they exist. I'm not sure where they are overall. Meh. I just don't view the social programs as working. We either need further social programs or none at all. I guess we just go your route, the total chaotic
And
entropy for drugs.
that's one of the things that makes mental health so expensive, is the fact that half of it is prescribing drugs that you can't prescribe yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't prescribe them yourself. That's the point of a healthcare professional. You have to have that. You have to have a person like that. You can't just write yourself some prescription I'll take, I don't know, 200 of these. Screw it. If it works, it works, and if not, I've got 200. So
So if it doesn't work, are you going to continue taking it?
I don't know. It depends on the person. That's an individual decision at that point. Even if you do get prescribed, as an individual decision. You get to go to your doctor and be like, "Hey, yo, this drug isn't working. Let's talk about something else."
Mental health is just, there's a lot encompassing it, and sort of the way we talk about it right now is we also conflate having bad circumstances as being mentally ill, because there are some people that have really
Wait.
bad circumstances.
No. What? We conflate bad circumstances as mental illness?
Yes, because some people are...
You're gonna have to give an example for that.
Okay, so some people are wildly depressed, but they also have a really shitty life. So something we brought up...
So you're suggesting that their depression is completely externalized?
In some cases, it could be, yes. And when you take...
That is a... Okay. I don't think so. I think... Yeah, generalized depression, periodic depression, could be externalized, maybe, but as far as a chronic depressive diagnosis, I highly doubt it's entirely externalized.
Well, right.
There's a lot to do
and that's
with
what
your
I'm saying,
mental
is there's a difference between chronic versus just general depression, because with chronic depression, that is a genuine chemical imbalance in the brain, versus sort of a more nihilistic depression or a materialistic depression.
Nothing matters and I'm sad about it.
Exactly. So we talked a lot about nihilism last podcast, and it's interesting how we can accept the reality of nihilism and its prevalence in our society, but then when it comes to certain things like that, recognizing that some depression is just caused by nihilistic dread, like the fact that nothing matters.
Ooh,
Uh,
that's a heavy, deep subject you just touched on right there.
And
Nihilistic dread what, like a factor of depression?
it can be, yeah. And with a lot of people, that's
I-
not a lot of people. I'll stop
Okay,
using
now,
a lot.
we're generalizing the hell out of this right
We
now.
are
You've narrowed this down to external circumstances from external circumstances to nihilistic dread.
Well, okay, so if we're going,
Are
people
you
talk
gonna
a
keep
lot.
spiraling down this rabbit hole?
Well, it's not necessarily spiraling. It's more so kind of expanding the. It's more so compartmentalizing the parts of depression and the way we talk about it, because people will talk about, we need to talk about mental illness. We need to.
But that's an individual thing too. Everybody's depression is going to be different, and
Well, right, exactly. It is going to be different. So that's, again, is it society's responsibility to sort of help that person in the sense of like funding mass social programs or having mandatory mental checks, or is it the individual responsibility to find out where their illness lies?
the problem with that is that even if you do take it on an individual basis, that incurs individual cost, and frankly, the cost is too high. Mental health
Well, the cost is
is
too high because we have
200, 300 more a session for a therapist, like not just a psychiatrist, a therapist, like.
Right. So again, because that's so when you talk about
That's
therapy,
society asking you, how much money is your mental health worth?
And
How much can I make off of
exactly,
you feeling like
and that's
better?
that's kind of my point is, because we as individuals have devolved the responsibility of taking our own health into taking responsibility of our own health, we've devolved the responsibility to people who are willing and more than willing to charge people more and more.
But how did we shirk that responsibility? How did we give that responsibility away?
By,
I don't think that's right.
By not talking about the things that cause these issues, such as depression. So, because it's such a depression is such like a big sort of label. It is important to talk about the different types, because again, it's really important to distinguish the chronic depression versus a sort of existential depression.
So you're focusing on it's society's duty to fix like the blanket depression, the mass depression, nihilistic or
Right. Well,
economic.
I don't even think it's necessarily society's responsibility.
Not responsibility, but we could have a shared belief in talking about it. Thus,
Right,
it's less
right,
prevalent and,
right. And
and
we-
less alone feeling.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. Is we should just, because like a lot of things I say are incendiary in when they first come off, but it's not necessarily I'm trying to be incendiary or hyperbolic. Well, I am trying to be hyperbolic.
You're definitely trying to be hyperbolic.
But the point of that is to sort of see where the more rational side of those issues are. Like
what's the rationale for we shirk mental health? I'm still stuck on this idea that you believe that somehow we as individuals have given up our determination for our mental health. Like,
well, we have, because a lot of our solutions are we can't solve this on our own, which in reality, yeah, you should get help if it's something you can't solve on your own, but not everything is something you can't solve on your own. There are certain aspects of mental illness that is almost solely individualistic. It is solely on you to sort of get over a certain hump. And I'll bring in religion again, because last time we brought up religion a lot. That's where that idea of like faith comes in, because there is a lot of people who, especially with like.
I don't intend to make incendiary remarks, but if you ain't religious and you depressed, you can find it.
I'm not trying to tell you that you can find happiness or anything through.
That is almost directly what you implied just now.
No, it's I'm just trying to talk about my own religious faith and
You should
like how.
clarify that.
Well,
Because we were
it was
talking
clear.
in the general.
Well, right, we were talking about it in general, but I'm saying I'm gonna bring it back to religion and talk about the idea of like faith. So even outside of the religious faith of like faith in God or faith in whatever, there is that sort of like nihilistic dread that a lot of people have, or a lot of the whole like, oh, nothing matters.
What
I'm
you're
never
talking
gonna
about
be
isn't
happy.
faith; it's called hope. People have lost hope
Well,
in
they've
society
lost
and
lost
each other.
hope exactly, but the way to gain back that hope of things will be okay is to say, okay, well, I don't really know if things are going to be okay, but even though I don't know, I'm still going to.
That's the definition of hope. Yes.
Well, what's
That's the belief that things will get better is called hope. I hope it gets better. I believe, regardless of my current circumstances.
No, so there is a distinction between hope and faith. So hope is like, yeah, I hope it gets better. I hope this, whatever changes.
Well, I mean, the more esoteric version of hope is equatable to faith, in my opinion. Like, you have hope for society, even though you don't believe it's going to get better. You have hope in them. Have faith in them. I think those are interchangeable on that level. I know that they get distinguished as you go further down.
Okay, so even if they are interchangeable, when are we allowed to have hope again that we will get better as a society versus the idea that we will never get better?
That's a personal creation. That's something you have to tackle both individually and within small communities, or your own, nuclear zone. I don't know, nuclear contacts?
Like the.
I literally have a word for it. I can't think of it right now. We'll move on.
Well, you're talking about like the nuclear family, right? Like
yeah, I was trying to equate nuclear family to,
group, yeah,
as well as friends that
right,
are
exactly.
included in that.
Right. So with the idea of hope and things getting better as a society, when are we like? How do we talk about things getting better? Because right now it seems like we don't want things to get better.
That to me seems like a 6 points of contact thing. Like you bring the positivity, and somebody, even if it's one of 6 people around you, will follow. I think that's a societal thing. We've lost hope and faith in society because society's sort of lost its steamroll for centuries. We've always had, the next progression, things moving forward. And now we have technology that progresses, that's true, but it doesn't seem to move the world forward in a positive way, like,
right.
Steam engines did, or the industrial era, or even during world wars, there was always that new hope, like, okay, well, the war might end soon, and once it does, things will get better. And as they got better, and as it ended, things did get better, well, not necessarily throughout the Great Depression, but even that got better. And now it just, as far as, society talks about it, they're talking about this lasting forever. The world's going to die in 50 years because of global warming, and the economies are all failing, and especially now the economies are all failing. They're just tanking left and right.
And
that's not, it's getting worse by the standards of our news media.
Maybe that's a better way of me talking, like me, looking at it or angling it is, societally, like you said, we've kind of just given up hope, just like, oh, the world's going to die in however many years, 30, 50, 80 years, whatever the next projection is.
Yeah, they get shorter and longer as the
right. Whatever our system of government is failing, people have less and less trust in each other, and that's kind of it, is we just say like, yeah, these things are getting worse, and like, c'est la vie, that's it, it's just gonna happen. But are we allowed to say that maybe it doesn't have to happen? Like, maybe we can, because you can say that things are gonna end, like the world's gonna end in however many years, but let's say that because you don't do anything about it, that it does happen. But what we're saying is there's no possible chance of us coming back from it, because like you said, with like World War II, there was the hope that afterwards you'd get through it. And right now we have no hope that there is an afterwards of global warming. But if we were to take action now and change certain things, that there could be an after global warming when things are better.
Still bad.
They're still everything's gonna be bad always. Exactly.
Well, no, that's the thing, I think, is that we had decades knowing about global warming, had decades knowing that there was going to be an economic crash with multiple recessions worldwide, and continuing forward, we were just like, well, hopefully it gets better. And each one of them just got worse and worse and worse, and things started piling up. And now we're at a point where, we can't reverse global warming. Does that necessarily mean the world's going to end as soon as, we reach peak temperatures? I don't know. Probably not. I would believe that humanity's just too tenacious to die, but who's to say? And at that point, yeah, I think you're right. When we talk about societal mental health, those things have an impact. They have a great weight, even in the back of your mind. Just, even if you're a naysayer, what if it is true? What if the world will end at 2050 just because we didn't do anything about it? Like, that thought has to cross even the naysayer's minds, even the most hopeful person's mind. So,
Right.
if you're talking about how do we address mental health as a society, well, we need to address society, obviously. There's something wrong with the way that we've lived. Or the way that we're living now, I guess. We aren't changing fast enough.
Well,
We aren't.
society right now, like I grew up in the sort of mental health acceptance generation of yes, you have mental illness and it's okay. You can talk to anyone. And then I even went to a therapist for a long time, and a lot of it is just talking. At a certain point, I kind of was like, okay, well, how do I get past this now? Like, what do I do? And the same response was like, oh, no, it's okay. You can talk to me about it. And I understand that talking is
Well, for some people, it's extremely cathartic. That's how they get past things. And I understand your point of view. I'm not much of a talker myself.
so even with the whole talking about things helps you get through whatever. I've met a lot of people who they would make bad decisions. They would then talk about it, have that cathartic moment of, oh, okay, I got this off my chest, I feel better about it. But then they'd continue going down self-destructive paths.
I mean, at the end of the day, mental health in terms of therapy and psychiatry are really only there to be used if you want to take that advice. If deep down you just want to have that cathartic conversation, and then you continue to make bad decisions, that is a decision upon you. There's nothing anybody can do about it, unfortunately. You feel better about doing those things, perhaps, or you feel better after doing them, but it's sort of like AA is a trust thing. You go there trusting that your fellows aren't breaking the rules, and trusting that when you speak to somebody, they are in confidence, and there's no law supporting it. Not really. There's no. I mean, I guess maybe they have a confidentiality agreement. I'm not sure. I don't think they do. I believe it's completely voluntary.
Yeah, I think it is mostly voluntary.
So yeah, just it's one of those things where you go to a therapist, you talk about it, and they give you advice, or they say, okay, well, you need to make progress doing this, and this. Try exercising those things. We'll talk about it next time, and it's a trust thing. You got to do it if you believe that you can, and that's the only way it'll really help you is if you believe
that's
that.
a good example of bringing up AA is that's the steps you take after whatever addiction you have to sort of get through it after talking to a therapist or whatever. But a lot of people,
well, some people just join AA straight up just to stop themselves.
Right, exactly, yeah, and a lot of people there will have similar experiences where they can talk about it openly in the most open sense. You can say whatever, and most of them will be like, yeah, that's we understand where you're coming from. But that's individual responsibility of people taking it upon themselves to go and get that help.
But more serious mental illnesses don't have things like AA. There's not really a lot of suicidal AA equivalents. There's suicide hotlines, and there's perhaps a group you could talk to, but suicidal ideation isn't even nearly as popular as AA is. Everyone knows what AA is. The coins, the 12 steps, they know those things.
So suicidality is a good topic to talk about because
suicidality.
Okay.
No, I know, but I love the word.
That demographic.
I don't think that's a real word, but I like it.
I don't know if that's a real word. I can look it up after the show. But that sort of mindset of wanting to kill yourself. A lot of people will use that as kind of almost like a weapon. I've noticed it weaponized a lot recently, especially with my generation, because they say, okay, well, I'm mentally ill. And they say, okay, well, get help. And then they say, well, no, I just, like, I want to kill myself. And they're like, okay, well, here, we'll give you help. And then they're like, okay, well, thank you for helping me. Uh, Basically, what I need help with is I want to kill myself. And then they say, well, here's what you can do to not want to kill yourself and to kind of get through that. And they say, well, that's a lot of work. I want to keep doing the things that, like, I want to do. Which, in one hand, yeah, you should be allowed to do those things that you want to do. But if it makes you want to kill yourself, again, that's where that responsibility of the individual versus society.
So it's a real diverse topic, suicide overall. I mean, it's a very touchy subject, so
Yeah.
got to be a little careful with it. But I mean, I understand what you're saying when you say weaponize, suicide or self-harm or even depression in some cases can be definitely weaponized. But overall, I think people who, the cry wolf people, we'll call them, the people who either don't really feel that way or don't understand the depth of how that might look to the outside. I still feel like we should have the resources for them to get help, even if it's not fully real. Does that make sense? Like, I think those resources should be there.
Yeah,
and I know that you're saying, like, oh, well, you can get help this way. But a lot of that is, like, student counseling or, student counselors and perhaps a family therapist. Things that don't really address those directly. They address the person themselves. And I think that the issues themselves need to have a more focused group, like AA. Like, you go to suicide awareness. And I'm sure there is, like I said, groups like that. It's just not as widely known or advertised.
Right. And
the most you ever get is suicide hotline, which is everywhere. And I've never heard personal stories, but I have read some on forums about suicide hotline not being very helpful or being busy, which I think is just the most insulting thing. Like, oh, thank you for calling the suicide hotline. Please hold. Like,
please hold. You're not important for us. You're not important enough for us to talk to you right now.
Right. Like, you.
Tim's on break. Yeah, he doesn't care about you. You like, he took a break.
Or, I mean, it's also in reverse, sort of a pulse meter for how many people need help at that moment. Because you're like, oh, I'm on hold with the suicide hotline. That's really bad news for, like, a lot of people.
Yeah, and so...
Which I guess is the point,
Right.
Resources.
Exactly.
We need resources.
We need those like... And that's something that's... I'm having a hard time, like, wording it, but it's... A lot of people talk about it being, like, such a personal thing. But, like, the suicide hotline is busy. So, obviously, it's a lot more common of a thought and experience than people make it out to be. So, why not just talk about it openly? Talk about it 100% honestly. So, one of the things that, like, I think is interesting is the whole argument about legalizing suicide. And, again, so... we kind of come at it from different angles because you're more from the social program aspect of it, and I'm a lot more of the individual freedom and individual responsibility aspect of it. And I don't know when it comes to legalizing suicide where that responsibility lies.
I mean, if you are idealizing suicide, then at that point, your personal responsibility is flipped. It's upside down. You have this almost anti-survival instinct. You want to die.
Right.
How you want to die, I mean, that varies from person to person, I'm sure. But I do. I vouch for the social programs. I vouch for, if you know somebody is truly suicidal, then we should have a free, like, a 12-step program. We should have a, hey, if you end up still suicidal at the end of this 12-step program, then the last step is assisted suicide, which is painless generally and more humane by far.
So in that 12 steps, what are those 12 steps?
Oh,
or
God,
like
that's that.
well,
What are you asking me?
Exactly. So like
I don't know. I'm
it-
not a psychiatrist. Those are for professionals. That's why we have professional fields.
well, right. So just like this is our best guess. So like
I'm not gonna best guess a 12-step program for
Well,
suicide. That's
okay.
just
What's step 1? Like
step 1 is seeking help. That's always the first step in everything. Admitting you have a problem and seeking help. 1 and 2.
okay, and then like after you sought help, what do you do after that?
I don't know. I don't know what a 12-step program would look like for suicide.
So
Zach,
earlier-
maybe it's a 30-step program. What do
So-
I know? I'm not a psychiatrist.
Exactly. So earlier when I said that, like, hyperbolic and more jokingly, I said that I cured mental illness. Kind of what I was getting to is like those 12 steps to suicide, and then at the end of it, if you
to stop suicide.
no, because if it's legal and that's taking the assumption that there are some people who just think it's their time to die.
I get that, but you can't name it the 12 steps to suicide. That's not maybe.
Well,
like,
okay, just for now, like, okay, the 12 steps to stop suicide. Okay, that there is those steps though, those sort of like, because obviously it's hard to pin down what the exact steps are, but there is.
Is it obvious? Because you asked me twice.
Well, like you're the one who keeps bringing up the 12 steps. So
It's
what
an
I'm saying-
example. It's a.
Well,
it's a-
right,
it's
and when I bring up the hyperbolic statement, it's more so to get to that like philosophical idea of there is that 12 steps, or there is that however many steps to sort of not get to suicide, but the issue with that is then that implies that there is a step after 12 that might be suicide.
right,
So
and there's no problem with that. What's the
Well-
issue with having assisted suicide in general?
Well,
I mean, aside
exactly,
from all.
and that's kind of what I'm saying is, for like, that's kind of that's where I think the first step in talking about mental illness is there's always gonna be, in a small percentage or however many percentage, there is gonna be that step 13 of no, I think I just want to die, and
Right.
so.
I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with it costing money on an individual basis. I think that's ridiculous. But I mean, other than that, I see no problem with that.
So-
If you've reached the end and you finally say like, "Hey doc, I don't feel any better," or you know what, I just don't want to be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, well, we took you through the steps that maybe they're tried and tested, or maybe they're
Right.
a working step program. I couldn't tell you.
And because there is no social program right now, like that's like super accessible, nothing that's
Or widespread
or
and talked
widespread,
about.
exactly. The that's gonna have to come from the talk first. So like the talk that we're having right now, there's going to have to be a conversation about it, like massively, because this is the conversation that we're having about it. Because we can have it in this, however
This limited tiny room, and it goes nowhere.
Right, exactly, because we don't have the power, we don't have the resources, we don't have the influence to make a difference in that talk. Besides
At least
just,
not on a widespread scale. Of
yeah,
course. We
like-
can talk to you guys.
Yeah, we can talk to you, and that's pretty much all we can do is just start to say like, yeah, there is this conversation, because so kind of when you said like recognize you have a problem, one of the like I guess
think a caveat to that should be like a recommendation program, which they do have. You can have somebody committed with enough evidence, of course, but that's a much more violent,
right,
like emotionally violent
right,
way of
very very traumatizing in and of itself.
I don't think that's the healthiest. But that's like a last resort program. It should be more of like a, hey, we should go together. We could talk about it together, and
Right.
then we'll introduce you to this program that they have.
Right, and
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. I just
no, it's not
it
necessarily.
occurred to me that you can have somebody committed,
Right,
which
and
is
that,
just like
that's
the
kind of
most-
what I'm thinking about is when you have a lot of these social programs where it's like get help. If someone doesn't want help and they're perfectly fine not getting help, just with sort of like a self-medication, just getting through whatever they can, what's the difference between being self-medicated in a functional way versus being medicated through a professional in an unproductive way?
You're talking about substance abuse, basically.
Substance, yeah, you specifically medication, like any, because medication is just drugs used for a medical purpose. So,
Right.
what? So what? Like, where
So
does that difference?
so are you? I guess I'm a little lost here. Are you arguing that drugs, illegal substances, etc., are used if you are a functional human being with suicidal or depressive ideations, and you use those things and continue functioning? Like, are you arguing that that is what you want? Or are you arguing for why couldn't we give people the options to sign themselves up for these?
I'm not
the
even
professional
necessarily
drugs?
making an argument yet. It's more so my question that I'm.
Maybe I don't understand the question.
Well, okay, so I'll repeat the question. Like, I'll pose the question. I guess, is that what it's called? Like, I'm posing a question.
Repose, yeah.
Is what's the difference between self-medication effect or in a productive way versus professional medication in an unproductive
So
way?
let's say somebody's, prescribed SSRIs for, depression, or or you're just, smoking weed, let's
Yeah.
say. Like, and in one case, smoking weed, you're an effective, feel better member of society, and
Yeah,
on the prescription drugs, you aren't feeling any different, maybe even worse.
right.
Okay. Well, no, there's no difference. And then that I think links to an issue of listening to patients in a way, and also maybe legalizing more drugs in general, because again, if you're a functioning heroin addict and you're not, hurting anybody, there's no real issues from my point of view, other than you're addicted to heroin. But, there are plenty of semi-functioning addicts all over the world. But no, I see what you're saying is if you find something that helps you remain productive in society, then yeah, there's no issue with that. The problem is that people self-medicate without limitation. Does that make sense? So you self-medicate with alcohol or weed or, Xanax, and you take more to feel better, and then you start chasing that feel better,
Right.
and you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's where the issue comes in for self-medication, because a lot of people don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not necessarily self-control at the beginning, they just don't have that thought that, oh, I'm taking more this time, that's not a good sign. Or they justify it in their head, like, oh, I need more, I've been on this for 2 months, I want to feel even better. And I think that's really where the issue comes in, is that most, especially when it comes to mental illness, because you're trying to solve something inside yourself that you can't quite pin down directly.
Right.
Like, there's something wrong, but you can't, force it into an acknowledgeable concept, because, again, if you could, you wouldn't, have a mental illness. So I think that is where I would say that's where we need a professional guidance system.
And what you just said there is kind of like interesting about, if you could figure out what that wrongness was, then you wouldn't have a mental illness. And that's kind of like the crux of me saying I've solved mental illness. It's not I've solved it. It's we have to realize at what point is it, am I using mental illness to continue like getting help, or is it the responsibility on me now to realize that I'm no longer mentally ill? Like, I see where this, because similar with like asthma, if you know where it's coming from, you can live in accordance with that sort of health defect.
Right.
And you're still ill, but at
So
what
you're asking
point,
if
like,
if you recognize that you're depressed, or you recognize that you're suicidal, and you would, I guess, address those things on a personal level. Is your question, would the help system be necessary at that point? Is that the
it's not well. I think the help system would be necessary no matter what, because to get to that point of like sort of recognizing where the issue
okay,
is.
I guess let me rephrase my question. What points do you think should be on an individual basis?
So first, getting help should be on an individual basis, because if you're not getting help, like no one else can say, hey, you need to get help for that.
Well, I mean,
Like,
you could, but
you could, but it's not as effective. Like as the whole you
right.
can lead a horse to
Resistance
water.
is definitely the antithesis of progress in those type of situations.
Mhm.
You know, resisting, help overall makes the help unhelpful.
Right.
Usually.
Exactly. So first, yeah, and that's something that I've heard a lot is like you can get help for this, like you can talk to anyone, and like that's 100% true. But then, if you can, like, do it. If you really need help, do it. Like you need to go get help. But after getting help, if you realize that it's not helping, there's a certain point where you gotta have that more like I don't want to say stoic view of things, but like you have to figure out what you need to take responsibility for because it's different for everyone. A lot of people, and that's where I'll bring up the weaponizing mental illness again. Is there's a lot of things that are material, like you're depressed because you can't pay rent. You're depressed because you want to live in a dirty room, but the person you're living with says, "Hey, you should clean that up," and you don't want to. You would rather just not do it, and
I think that's a little bit minor, but yeah, okay. If that makes you depressed,
that
it does.
is minor, yeah, and like it's just like hypothetical examples right now. But if it's like that level of stuff that's making you depressed, then you can maybe see more clearly that it's a material depression versus a chronic depression with like hormones or hormones.
Hormones, chemical imbalance.
Chemicals,
We'll just call it
yeah.
chemical imbalance. I think that's a better idea.
And
I mean, okay, I see that point. I see where you're going with that point, more or less. But even if those people exist, you don't want to clean your room.
mhm.
Shouldn't it be that if it is a continuous and unchangeable thing, like you just can't pay rent and there's nothing you can do about it,
Mhm.
in an immediate fashion to actually help yourself,
Mhm.
then shouldn't there be an option for help even at that stage?
And that's where my question lands again. Whose responsibility is that? Is it the individual's responsibility to pay rent, or is it society's responsibility to pay the rent for them?
Mine.
Because, yeah, paying rent makes me sad. So if it makes me sad, then shouldn't...
Oh, now you're saying okay. Well, that's a good argument too, if your depression is material overall, where does it lie in your responsibility to say, okay, I need to fix this materially on
Mhm.
my own, get a better job, or get a roommate, or
Can we let her out?
yeah, go ahead. Excuse us, my cat, she's a brat.
She decided to put in her 2 cents.
She disagrees with Zach.
It's
No,
a cat.
I mean, I guess I get where you're coming from. It's overall just, it's a tough issue to tackle, and as a society, I do agree with you that we do need to talk about it more. We need to be more open about it. I think that's a growing consensus as well. More people are trying to address mental health, but I also think that eventually it is going to have to come down to society as a whole just taking care of some people. Like, I know that there's a lot of disagreement with this idea, but some people just can't take care of themselves. And yeah, there are always going to be freeloaders and people who are trying to take advantage of the system, but in a way, that is a type of mental illness equally. They just don't want to contribute to society.
And so for myself, I don't know how. Like I have very radical viewpoints and like whatever, but
Whatever.
yeah, like that's you signed up for this if you're listening to this.
This is your fault.
This is your fault. With those sort of people who like we're just gonna have to take care of, I will, sort of agree with that. There are some people that just don't want to, and like literally the option is either take care of me, or like I'll kill myself but I don't want to
Right,
kill myself.
you'll weaponize.
Right. So there's, and then it's like, okay, well, what about the people who want to kill themselves? Like, okay, well, now you're getting rid of their perspective. So for the people that like is like, take care of me or I'll kill myself, you either have to say, okay, I'll take care of you, but under these circumstances, and not necessarily in this. You have to do this or you have to do this, but like this is the extra shit that I can afford. Like, this is the room I have available for you. This is what you get. Either you accept it,
Right.
kill yourself, or make yourself materially better on your own.
Well, I mean, even if okay, so let's walk through that. You say I don't want to be a part of society anymore. I just want to live, you know. However, I just don't want to work. I don't, and perhaps you don't even want to socialize. That to me doesn't matter all that much.
No, it doesn't.
So you take we'll call it like a half studio, even just like a small room with a bed, and you start off with no material possessions, no ability to make money. Maybe you get a stipend for groceries, or even just have groceries delivered.
Right, and so
I feel like eventually, with enough space from having to contribute to society, from feeling that you have to contribute, that you're not making enough, that you're not doing enough, living like that, most people would improve. They would choose to improve. I actually think that's a kind of a good idea.
I think so as well, and that's
call them like separation homes or whatever, monasteries.
Well, something that like I've talked to you about before is for people like that. Right now, they have entire housing. They have entire houses just given to them by the government. A lot of like Section 8 housing is just sort of, it's an entire house.
Well, I mean, no, that's not an entire house. It's usually apartments, and they're not very good.
Well, right, but if it was even smaller rooms, like something I bring up a lot is like storage units. Like
this is getting extremely regimist again.
No, it's not. It's not.
Maybe we should punish those people.
No, it's well.
What's the other? I kind of agree that in theory, what we're talking about, yeah, that could work, but you can't distinguish between people who cannot help themselves and people who do not want to contribute. So what you're doing is you're punishing those who can't help themselves to try and rid yourself of the people who don't want to contribute.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up, because saying there's the people who can't help themselves and then there's the people who don't want to contribute. Well, a lot of right now, the way we have it is, if you don't want to contribute, you have to convince society that you are one of the ones that can't help because of X, Y, and Z.
Right, but that doesn't, just because one kid threw gum in class doesn't mean you punish the whole class. I mean, I know that's how we all grew up, but it's not the right way to do things. You can't just start shrinking down home sizes and giving them smaller and smaller stipends in hopes that they go, find work. Because that doesn't work. We've been doing that already.
So if they can't tell themselves, what work can they find? So
it's just going to be that way. I disagree with the idea that, they can do something. Like, some people can't, or some people won't, or they shouldn't. And that's the biggest thing, is sometimes you shouldn't, because it's bad for their mental health. It makes them worse. It has dire consequences for their financial
But then the issue is the people who are forced to take care of them, because of course
that would be all of us. There's 300 million people. If it cost each of us $5 to house these people, it's not a big deal.
It's not going to be all of us, though, because there are going to be, the sort of rich upper class to where it's
they should be included. It should be by percentage, by the amount of money you make. It should be, 2% of your income, no matter who you are, goes towards this. And done. It's a flat 2%. Everyone pays it. There doesn't need to be this weird classist system that overcomplicates these very, very simple, straightforward things. There are always going to be people we have to take care of in society. They don't have to live like, I don't know, scum of the earth. That doesn't seem fair. Especially even for the people who just don't want to contribute to society. You're not helping anybody by forcing them to. They're just going to be shit workers trying to screw as many people over as possible. Why even bother? You degrade society by forcing them to work.
Well, right, and then
And
so
then-
so eventually, if there is no distinction between a sort of working class and then the uncontributing class where you can just get the same things, what's the point of working? What's the point of continuing
I'm not
to?
okay. Well, now you're theorizing that we pay for them up to a point of working class. I'm not saying that. I'm saying give them a bedroom apartment or 2 bedrooms, depending on their family size. Give them enough food or money to eat and money to have a couple nice things like a cell phone or a computer, basic fucking human necessities, a
Yeah.
car.
Yeah,
Like,
or even have like public phones and public
right,
computers
right.
because
Well, we
like
can
that's
include that in those
In-
things,
in-
and
in those
that's
facilities,
the
right.
point where I'm saying you're not living like a working class person. You maybe like a minimum wage worker, yeah, but the whole point of working minimum wage, at least in theory, or should be, is that you move up the ladder as you get older. You get
Mhm.
better positions, better money, better pay, multiple jobs. You can buy nicer things. You can personalize the things you buy.
right.
That's the point. I disagree with the idea that we would pay for these it in it.
So I guess I don't disagree with you in how we should help. What I disagree with is how we label things now. Because right now we say you can only get help if you are one of the people who can't help themselves. So then what that leads to is people who don't want to contribute, that want that sort of free stuff in terms of free housing or food stamps that say, okay, well, this is the reason I can't help myself. But instead, yeah, I think we should just lump them in with the same people who can't help themselves and then figure out a more efficient way to house these people. Because
agree
eventually,
with
like
that.
you said, if they were all given that sort of base level starting of just a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, and then provided food, provided internet access, provided cell phone, then that would give them only the 2 options of either get better and help themselves out, or don't and
Yeah.
like just stay there, or just take the easy way out, like
Easy way, I assume you're referring to
to
suicide.
suicide. Yeah.
Well, I don't feel like a lot of disabled. I mean, I know that it is higher in that population, but there are plenty of disabled, unable to help themselves people who are not suicidal.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's
And yeah, I
I
agree.
actually I respect that so much because that's kind of it. Like, yeah, they were dealt the shittiest hand, like materially and like physically. Like they were given the worst set of circumstances, and despite that, they're like, no, I want to continue trying.
Yeah,
But
and
then
that's highly admirable. And I have no contention with letting people live as they want, more or less. And I agree that to a point, yes, there will be perhaps even more people from society who will defect to that I don't want to contribute anymore
Right.
stance.
But
There's enough people that we could make that work. And 2,
Mhm.
yeah, give them the basic necessities, and maybe they can find something they can do. Maybe they find something they like to do on their own. Maybe it takes a few years instead
Right.
of having them like,
And
oh,
what's
well,
what's cool about that is if they find something that they like to do and they actually are passionate about, there's a chance that that would be profitable for them. And not only if it's profitable, that means that there is a market for it, which means that there is a market that is themselves profiting off of, emotionally profiting off of whatever
Right.
their venture is.
Well, even-
But so I guess I don't know how to, because I think with that like classification of we only help out the people who can't help themselves, I think because with those people who can't help themselves, I have a lot more respect for them than I would someone who just doesn't want to contribute. But I
right,
don't,
well, that's a personal perspective. That's something that they would take on, really. I mean, there's no for somebody who doesn't want to be a part of society. That is something they would have to acknowledge. Is yeah, I may lose respect of some of my peers, even my unknown peers.
well, that's fine, but like, because we give the accommodations to the people who can tell themselves that I kind of feel like they deserve it brings in that sort of class of the unhelping, like the people who don't want to contribute, and it puts them on that higher pedestal of the people who can't help themselves. And I don't know how to. I don't know how to sort of give the people who don't want to contribute a pedestal without lowering the people who can't help themselves, in the sense of like giving them a smaller apartment or.
Right. Well, that's part of the problem anyway. Like you said, people they'll fake it, or they'll lie, or they'll get to that point regardless. So I think we give them all a fair little block in our society in the pyramid and say, hey, this is what you get. I'm sorry, it can get better. And a lot of that, I've talked about this with some other people. A lot of the problem with our system, the reason that we keep saying like, oh, we give them this section of the pyramid instead of having it being a ladder, is because our help programs cut you off if you start making too much money. And then you make less money, which is ridiculous in the worst kind of sense. We need programs that allow you to make money on your own and maybe step down the amount that you help, but at least so that you're progressing forward instead of, oh, you hit a line, now you are fine on your own.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, so like next to our work, there's these apartments that I wanted to move into, but they're low income. And it's weird because
they're super nice. They're very, very
really
nice.
nice, yeah. But the apartments that I were at before, they were the cheapest, and like literally the cheapest that I could find. It was $6.95 a month, and then
You
plus
had a
utilities.
2-bedroom or something?
I had a 2-bedroom, and it was because it was pre-renovation, so it was like the older models, and they were renovating the whole thing. But it was the cheapest you could find, and it was still not like it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't like the best, but it was still like I was happy there. But at that $6.95 a month, that's like the cheapest. So then I tried, when I wanted to move, I was looking at those low income apartments, and they were still like, they were more. They were $7 something a month or $800 a month.
Right, but the low income apartments get a stipend from the government, I believe. So you pay a portion of that rent, say like $300 for an example, and then the government pay the rest.
Well, right, but
which is sort of shitty because you're actually costing the government even more money.
Exactly, that's where that sort of like insurance versus private, that's inflating each other.
Yeah.
Because that's supposed to be the low income. Like, if I was at the lowest price one, that means I couldn't afford a higher one, which means I should, be able to be in that low income. But because I made too much, I made enough to like pay my rent the first time, like fine enough. But with those low income ones, I'd be paying a little bit more. It would be nicer and closer to work, so in that I could sort of figure things out for myself.
Right, it would progress you.
It would progress me personally, right? And which is kind of why I feel it's weird that they cut you off at a certain point, because if you're too successful, you're not worth the help anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so there shouldn't be a cutoff point. Like a tapering would make more sense, even to the point of a little bit of excess, so that you're well above this line, perhaps even with other people, but we'll give you a little extra help for say 6 months, just to stabilize you or boost you forward, because you came from.
If you were making a lot more money, you are contributing more into the taxes, which are going back into that than anyone else there,
and theoretically society, because you have a a job.
Exactly, because then if you personally want a nicer place, you can then leave that sort of like safe place and go to a nicer place. I do think it's just
it needs to be a step down program, not this like, again, the little block of the pyramid. That I don't like that concept. I know we're talking about in overall theory and concept, but that concept really bothers me on a personal level.
I think we are starting to lose a little bit of steam.
Yeah, I think we've devolved into a spiral here, so I think we're gonna wrap it up real quick.
It was good though. I did like this conversation.
Yeah, I liked that conversation. I mean, we didn't obviously touch or resolve everything. We know that.
On
but
the next episode, we're gonna be explaining the universe.
I solved the
I
universe.
solved the universe.
damn
I
it, Zach.
solved life. I beat the sim on my own.
Oh,
I'm gonna post. I'm gonna
Jesus.
post the walkthrough.
I hope we never talk about Sim 2. Thank you for joining us, guys. If you liked what you saw and heard, please remember to subscribe down below. Leave us a comment about things that you think that we should talk about, or if you had an issue with stuff we said, we're happy to hear that too. You all have a wonderful day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.